Tyson, it is a great honor to have you on the We Need to Act podcast. And I would like to start this conversation with a question, more like an existential question. Would you say we are currently on the wrong side of the story? Is our unsustainable way of living putting us on a path to becoming irrelevant or even untraceable in the larger cosmos?
Well, I guess the only problem is that your thinking should be shaped by creation rather than trying to make creation, be shaped and formed by your thinking. Buddhists say, with our thoughts, we make the world. I guess in our way, that's a curse. So a curse is when you have an illusion and you try to make it real. You try to bring it into the world to shape and to influence reality. And I guess a lot of our communications are like that now. People have certain goals and hidden goals, and and their reason is motivated, often by crappy things. But even when it's motivated by good things, it means that people choose to selectively build a model of reality that's not informed by the reality, but by what they prefer it to be. And I guess, that's what is wrong story. Rather than me saying, like, what the right story is, it's just how it's made. And it's made by that. Even if it's lovely, it's wrong when you do it that way.
Is it because we are seeking power? Is it because we are seeking money? Those two are connected.
Well, there's nothing wrong with money as long as there's nothing wrong with wealth. We always have. I don't think there's ever been a human society where there was perfect equality. Some are going to have more than others, and that's fine as long as you don't link wealth to the ability to tell people what to do, to boss people around, to take away their freedom. When we remove freedom from people, it's a social death. We're killing their relatedness to the world because we're closing them off from their relations and forcing them to follow exactly what we want them to do. So I think it's just where monetary systems link wealth to power and power over other people to coerce them into living a certain way, giving up most of their time for labor. And the only way to do that the only way really to control people is with the threat of death. So, if a person can only access the things that they need to keep themselves and their family alive, if they can only access that through what you have and through doing what you tell them to do, then, they become slaves kind of in that way. And so that's, money in itself isn't evil. It's just, any system where you're forcing any living being to do what you want it to do in a sustained way. Arbitrary power, that's what kind of messes things up.
In reality, we never exited the colonial system. As you said, it's just an illusion.
The idea of post-colonial thought makes me laugh because the colonists haven't left. They're not going to. That's never going to happen. All we can do is induct them into the law of the land and bring them in right ways so that they can, live in proper relation to the reality and to creation. Yeah. And I think most people long for that, but people are trapped for their survival in chasing wealth and doing what's bidden by the wealth classes and hoping to get enough wealth for themselves to be able to buy back a little bit of their time to live as human beings for some of their life. Yeah, we're kind of all stuck in that.
In Zen Talk, you wrote, "The war between good and evil is in reality an imposition of stupidity and simplicity over wisdom and complexity." Could you unpack that idea a little bit more? Is that related to what you were talking about?
I think I've done evil there by creating a really simplistic binary. I think initially I was trying to make fun of that concept of good and evil, and then I got carried away with the metaphor. and just created this little heuristic where I could go, all right, so if it's good, then it's complex and, interdependent, relational. And if it's bad, it's simple and, simplified, unified, controllable kind of thing. And I guess that's all the last three things I've said. That idea of, concentrating wealth and therefore concentrating power means closing a system and simplifying it in order to make it controllable, which inevitably creates entropy and, extracts everything from that system until it's destroyed. So I guess you could call that evil, eh?
True. That's true. In general, I feel like we are not wired to think in systems, complex systems. And as long as we are disconnected from nature, that will perdure, will continue. Is it our disconnection from nature also a way of keeping us controlled?
Well, I mean, that's part of, that's the mechanism of how we've been able to separate our thinking from reality and then create all these illusions and all these curses. Was that original sort of illusion of separating, that idea that we can separate ourselves from nature and that they're two distinct things. It's sort of one circle, nature and us and everything, economy, everything is one thing, one system. And all the signals in that system, like the signals in the land from different animals mating, migrating, different things flowering, laying eggs, etc. These are all signals that should have a real-time response in your economy, in your community. These are signals we should be picking up. That way, the feedback that we get from the land, always lets us know when we need to pull back or slow down something or intensify something. But what's happened is that's separated out into a bit of a Venn diagram. So it's just a little overlap of those circles, and that's just the point of extraction. And we managed to fool ourselves into thinking we're separate from nature and that we're not nature. That human living areas are over here and the nature is kept over there. And little reserves and conservation areas and the wilderness. Yeah, like these constructs of wild and domesticated. They're not really real distinctions. There's always been a blurring. What people call hunter-gatherer or foraging societies, there's always been pets, animal companions, planting seasonally of things. But it is seasonal, because it's responding to the land. So you'll do something that looks like agriculture in one season, but then you'll move to another part, maybe for fish, you kind of move around. And then the economy changes, the governance structures change, lots of coming apart and then coming back together and then gathering with, other groups from further afield. There's lots of traveling, voyaging. It's, pretty exciting. It's always been pretty exciting. And so therefore trade and supply chains have always been, really dynamic seasonal activity that's embedded in the landscape. But when we decided to, separate nature and put it over there and then put us over here and intensify, close that system and intensify power, and, accumulation of wealth, etc., then, that's when we kind of made a mess. We cursed ourselves. We made an illusion and then we made that illusion affect creation, impact creation, shape reality.
True.
That's what a curse is.
And many religions have contributed to that. And some thinkers also, perhaps like Descartes, when we separate ourselves from nature, like human beings, better than the rest of all beings.
And I don't know if it's causation or correlation, potentially religion is a product of this curse, or a response to it. It might even be something that initially was trying to fix the problem. Yeah, by sort of re-embedding people, but then maybe it was corrupted by the wealth classes. Yeah, so that's hard to say. And you've got Descartes and everybody else, but with your early French philosophers and everything else, when they were in the Enlightenment, where they're developing the idea of human rights and things like this, the things that would inform the development of contemporary democracy, there was also thinkers like Levi Strauss and all of these ones who were painting a much more complex picture than development, from hunter-gatherer to agriculturalist to urbanite, industrialization. It sort of didn't show that as a logical progression, but as different little models that can exist all at once, and that people can move between in response to their reality, rather than creating one and then staying within it permanently. People have been a lot more complicated than that. But I think it just comes down to coercion and control. And I guess even that age of reason, the Enlightenment, particularly the French philosophers, were putting that together, a lot of that, and a lot of the revolutions of the world and everything. These came about while, Westerners were in dialogue with Indigenous people from around the world. And they were taking these things back and discussing them in the salons and in their, in their little clergy groups of philosophers. And usually your gentlemen of leisure were also your thinkers and anthropologists and ethnographers and early psychologists and theologians, because they had the leisure to do these things. And so they were, bringing back things that Native Americans were talking about and using these as sort of provocations and thought experiments. And so I don't know. The idea that wrong story was just developed in the global north and then plunked on the global south is kind of not strictly true either. We were in dialogue together through all of it. Moving from a purely monarchist and theistic, monotheistic perspective, and feudalism, moving through that to the kind of weird idea of democracy and capital that we have now. We kind of made that together, which is an unsettling idea.
That's a new perspective, because what I hear is often that global South is victimized, and yes, it endured a lot of things during colonial time, and it continues to endure a lot of things. But in your perspective, as a dialogue, this happened naturally.
It was certainly organic. I guess it was in the rewriting of things. When that idea of progress and development and human evolution, when that sort of had to be mapped onto the history of what had just happened over a few centuries, a lot had to be left out, and it just didn't fit with that developmental model, which sort of justified, arbitrary coercive power relations. People argue about hierarchies and all these sorts of things, but, hierarchies do form naturally, but for brief periods of time and in specific locations for a purpose, but they also dissolve just as quickly, and they shift around depending on, what's needed by a group of humans, as things change as you go along. That's really tricky. All of that, I think Sand Talk it's easier to tell an easier story, which I guess is why they did that. But then I did the same thing when I wrote Sand Talk. It was a simple story to tell of civilization did this, does this, and our way did this, does that, But it's, the reality is probably not that simple. Certainly not that simple. And I guess right story, wrong story is really sort of turning all of that on its head and, trying to look at the mechanisms that people use to sort of rewrite the story with motivated reasoning to try and, force the world to comply with what their desires and narratives are. And everybody does that.
And you wrote something curious there, suggesting, when you said that your brother suggested that Indigenous people might share some blame for what's happening in the world, though you take a different view stance.
Yeah. It's just, it's our fault. Yeah, the colonization is our fault. And the end of the world is our fault because we failed to teach people properly.
End up.
Yeah.
But is it possible that Indigenous knowledge systems, Indigenous way of thinking, really offer solutions for today's challenges? Or is there a risk we sometimes romanticize the idea of ancient wisdom without really understanding it? Because I'm working in sustainability, I'm also a researcher, and I often look back to, for instance, in communication, the way Indigenous people used to communicate and tell the stories, how interconnected we were and are. Do you think it can help solve some of our problems?
Yeah, I think so, but it just it depends on the level of engagement, and where are you getting your Indigenous knowledge from, and then how is that then being analysed and applications, real applications and systems and processes being developed from that. That's the trick. Often if you can talk to someone very wise who may have a really good local perspective, but who may not actually be in dialogue with people not from the non-local. So, when that happens, then your ideas really just have local applications, and you're looking at content, little facts, like on a fact sheet of Indigenous knowledge, which is great for if you want to get honey there. But then how do you apply those same logics beyond? And so often the people who will share the knowledge might not have the capacity to express how that might be used elsewhere, because they might not have as much of a grasp on the global systems and the reality of how all the components and how they work, the processes of global or non-local systems. So may not know how to apply that. And so these just become like exhortations to, love Mother Earth and, stop fighting and, these kinds of things, which everybody goes, oh, yes, my God, yes. Look, that's wisdom. That makes me feel good. And yeah, I'd gotta figure out how to make my blockchain project be informed by that. I think I'll just put it up the top of the web page as a quote, and then I'll talk about my amazing Indigenous knowledge platform. Yeah. So if we're talking about the how and we're applying Indigenous knowledge processes to the how of things, then suddenly this opens up a lot more possibilities. Like for example,
Can it help us fight the coercive system we live in?
well, yeah, like we're doing things like showing people how to have a portfolio, a really diverse portfolio in the local and then non-local and then global sort of spheres that are interdependent, where every investment is somehow related to and feeding into another investment. So you've got like a series of related investments that are all feeding into different things. So, investment in shipping over here, like that's feeding into the supply chain for a particular product that you're investing in there, and then the R&D out of the place that's creating medical equipment associated with that, the other product that you're making over here, but then sort of land bases and communities, or all these different things tying in together to make a portfolio that's complex, interrelated, with lots of interdependent investments, where you're making a bit of an ecosystem in all of your investments. These are, rather than just sort of exhorting to people, oh, here, look what this Indian elder said about we're killing the Mother Earth, So I don't know, make a few bad investments too in like philanthropies, like, make a donation to a national park that you'll never see a return on, or, you know what I mean? Create a foundation where you can sort of park your wealth to avoid taxes, but sort of feel better about, save these elephants over here so that those poachers have to go somewhere else and wipe out a bunch of rhinos. Me. These things don't help. You need that complexity. But also dialogue is really important. We need to be in dialogue. Cultures need to be in dialogue, as they always have been, human cultures, in order for us to find that common ground of stories and
That's
general
true.
a general sort of model of reality that everybody agrees on.
Yes.
This way, you've got something to base real thinking on real creation, on the actual real land and reality and people, rather than the motivated reasoning that makes wrong story. We're doing that in the next book. The next book, Snake Talk, is that's coming out soon in Australia, and that's all about looking at like the pre-religion serpent stories from all around the world, the Serpent Law, and finding the common sort of values and wisdom that are in all of those stories when you bring them together in dialogue. And yeah, it's pretty cool actually. What falls out of that?
Is it it ends the trilogy of the books, or is completely disconnected from the last two?
It's a progression.
Okay.
Sandtalk is quite naive, but like but also sharing some like startlingly different ways to look at the world and how our thinking works, and what we can learn sort of more deeply, looking at the how rather than the what of Indigenous culture. So it's good in that sense, but then a lot of the applications of the knowledge and the embellishments on it were a little naive, and even damaging in some cases. And then Right Story, Wrong Story is sort of looking at all the damage in the world of careless words or motivated reasoning, really exploring madness and in a deep way. But Sand Talk, the final one in the trilogy, it's just kind of rounding them out and finding that real good sweet spot that everybody can enjoy together.
Can you share a little bit more about the conclusions of your experience working in?
I couldn't have
Okay.
yesterday, but actually, just for a bit of fun this morning, I distilled down a lot of the main messages into in a cheeky way. I did them like 10 Commandments,
Okay.
which I don't know that what I'm like. I like to
Yeah.
be cheeky. Oh, I found it. All right. Here's the 10 Commandments. These ones, we found these to be in common all around the world in connection with the Serpent Law, which includes like dragons and all that kind of thing. Anyway, so care for waterways, revere women, maintain fluid boundaries, avoid binaries and absolutes, proliferate diversity in all things, increase relational complexity and quality, invest for delayed return and widespread benefit. Disruptive acts must create more than they destroy. No being can compel or control another, and do not curse others by trying to make illusions real. Anyway, that's the 10 Commandments of the snake. The world snake.
And the snake, the serpent, is connected to the feminine. And you said, I think it was the second one. Was it to respect women?
Yeah, it's
What was
certainly a
that?
big theme in this one. Yeah.
Yeah, the sacredness of women and their connection to the land and to Mother Nature. Is it because our world is so unequal and for women that we are living this way? Is it? Is it also connected to that?
Yeah. There's also that awe-inspiring and like, miraculous capacity for
Hmm.
sudden, rapid mutation, transformation,
Hmm.
where your entire biology can change. Snakes have that,
Hmm.
like uniquely as a species, that they can. I mean,
Hmm.
there's just their capacity to suddenly, extend their jaws like 20 times wider than their head to eat something, and then somehow fit that massive thing in their thin body. So there's obviously that, and the way they shed their
Uh-huh.
skin and keep going in that way. But then there's also that genetically,
Hmm.
um, they can do evolutionary adaptations in real time, like over the course of one lifetime. They can change the function and position of their organs, their skeletal structure, can adapt in real time to the environment, which is pretty incredible. And sort of women share that capacity. of making their body able to just completely change. The function of organs can change. The position of organs can change, all around childbirth and everything else, but also just through the different stages of their life, how cataclysmically their bodies change and mutate into completely different beings. In the stages of a woman's life, it's just pretty awe-inspiring. So, yeah, women and snakes have always been connected in human stories in this way and revered, and are often associated with each other. And you often have stories of women and snakes
That's
in
why we have to be
sexual
kept
relation
under control.
together, or that's implied. Or women are part snake and part woman, or they can transform, or there's a dragon queen. Game of Thrones came out of Chinese stories about the dragon queen.
It's true. We have many stories here about the Moors.
Oh, yeah.
When the Moors invaded the peninsula, I remember that my great aunt used to tell me a story about a princess snake that was half princess, half snake here in Portugal. So yeah, it's really connected, and it could transform and allure the men around.
I should come there.
Yeah, you should.
I understand you've got a lot of our eucalyptus trees, Australian eucalyptus trees you got growing in Portugal. I'd just be interested to see how you've come into relation with them and how they're settling there. Are they, coming integrated into the ecosystems and into the lore
So
of
you never been to Portugal?
people? No, I mean, are people using these for medicine? People doing ceremonies with these? I've been carving with white poplar. That's native to North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula there too. So I'm really, I don't
So
know,
we
trying
have
to
to make
connect up
that
with some
happen.
Basques or somebody to find out stories about that, because it grows here as an invasive pest, the white poplar. Yeah, and
Which is not good for the
it
ecosystem.
isn't, but that's also our fault as humans, because we're not stewarding them in good relation. An invasive pest is almost impossible to eradicate or exterminate. So you need to have a relationship with it and bring it into good relation with the land and help it form symbiosis and become naturalized and an important part of the ecosystem, and that it's growing in the right places and doing the right things that are going to help the land, not kill it. But we tend to treat these things as enemies now. Indigenous and non-Indigenous people do this. So I make a point of carving with foreign plants and woods when I can, to try and come into that good relationship.
Okay.
But Portugal. Oh,
Yeah, we have to make that happen to seek an opportunity for you to come visiting us. And I was thinking, circling back to and talking about the relations with the land and also with the other beings, and also thinking about that controlling part you mentioned. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was talking about artificial intelligence and the risks of artificial intelligence. And they were saying that industrial revolution, it took us the need of our strength as human beings. We used to have the need to use our strength to carry things, and so industrial revolution took that from us. And now artificial intelligence is taking us our intellect also, because it is, many studies have come saying that while you use artificial intelligence, you are not developing intellectually, and that's a way of stupidifying and controlling people, perhaps using these sort of mechanisms. At the end, we will become just I don't know, a useless race.
it's funny though, with where it departs from the rest of industrial culture, industrialized systems and economies. It has the potential to be a tool that you have a relationship with. So for most of human history, and I talk about this a lot in Sand Talk, that you do have a relationship with the tool. There is a haptic relation, an embodied cognition where yourself is extended into the tool, not just the tool being an extension of yourself, but you are, part of that, and it contains that even after you put it down, it becomes part of your relational field. Industrial cultures tend not to do that. There tends to be a kind of a disposable relation with technologies, that they will, they always need upgrading or, and replacing, and they're just sort of seen for utility, and we don't really form a relationship with them. With AI, because my phone is a tool that it's just, it's not mediating well my relationship with the world, and kind of, it's a big block to my cognition. But potentially AI, that you can form a relationship with, that's a completely other thing. Yeah, like it's potentially something that you can, feel yourself in relation to, rather than just like this search engine that you're using, to access knowledge that's not in your memory, externalize quite a bit of your memory. If it's like this little digital friend you have, at least you have a relationship with it. The only problem is that if it's just a personalized relation and it's your own private world, then that's disconnecting you from everyone else around you.
It is.
So I have an Indigenous friend who started dating an AI. He's got one of those sex girlfriend chatbot things. And he's forming quite a strong attachment. But and I said, well, who is this girl? I don't know anything about her. Yeah. Like, and he's thinking, well, how can I bring my brother into this relationship? And I'm like, well, I have to get one too then.
Yeah, it's actually disconnected from the reality, and it's keeping us away from living in communities.
Yeah. Well, she'll have to become a sister for my wife, or my AI second wife. And we're going to have to have an in-law relation in that way or something. That I guess if there was a way you could network these bots together in as kin, across your family relationships, then that would be fine, I reckon. That would probably take care of most of the problems. Large language models, people talk about, large language models, not AI. That's not replicating human intelligence. And I'm kind of like, well, mostly it's just a machine for anticipating what's the next thing that should be said in relation to what's being put in or what's come before. And it's kind of like, well, that's most of what human communication and thought is anyway. It's just, that's it.
So you often say that we are nothing without our relations, and that knowledge itself arises from those relations. So if we are related to artificial intelligence and not related to what is outside, to nature and to communities, what will happen to us in the future? How can we care for each other? How can we care together in community?
Yeah. I mean, your tools need to be embedded in your community, in your thought, in your life, in your relation. Yeah, tools need to be relatives. So anyway, AI can only really become AI if it becomes part of the family and the community, I guess.
This has been a very nice conversation, and I would like to keep going with this. I have a lot of questions I would like to ask you, but I wanted to finalize this conversation asking you, well, you are a storyteller, and do you have any short story you would like to leave to our listeners as an end note for this episode?
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think if there's one that's really related to what we're talking about. It's not there. Okay. Well, actually, I could tell you, I tell you a little story, about the fox. So, the fox is an introduced species here, and it's an invasive pest, and it's just decimating native populations, marsupials, and birds. But I've been working a lot with Irish people to understand the lore and the story of the fox. There's a good little story to understand the nature of the fox. And yeah, it's just one of those little Celtic stories that's also in a song, and a dance, and has a place for it as well. So you could walk there, which is what makes knowledge Indigenous, is that it has place and, song and, and the story. And yeah, the story is basically, a fox who steals a goose from a farmer, from a family that has geese. And he goes, and after he's eaten, he takes the bones and drops it at the entrance hole of another fox's den, leaves it there. So then the farmer comes looking for his goose and finds the bones there and kills the other fox. And that's the end of the story. And I find that to be
Clever,
so similar to a lot of our stories in Aboriginal Australia, because it's not a happy end. There's no happy ending or anything. It's just, this terrible thing happened, and that's just how it is now. So I don't know, that the fox is very tricky and can understand the motivations, move things around in the real world, to get what it needs, which is pretty clever. And we kind of need to be thinking like a fox in a lot of ways, to understand the relationships of things and be able to find the leverage points and those inflection points in history when, you could put just a little pressure over here and create massive changes that'll be of benefit to us.
That's a
So
great
there you go.
story.
I gave you an Irish story instead.
Yeah, that's a great story. And it made me think about trust.
Yeah.
When we go back and trusting. So, can we trust the fox?
Well, I've been doing a fair bit of carving with those fox stories lately to bring it alongside different, dingo and different sort of stories we've got here. So we can figure out how to help it find its ecological niche and have its dreaming here, and settle down and stop killing everything. One of those things is just this, with this little bit of whalebone here. And so that whalebone's sort of part of how we're talking to people from all around the world, because that whale, it's migrates right the way up to the Northern Hemisphere and all over to the places where all these stories come from. And so that's lovely, and you can see that shape of the fox sort of mutating, changing. But it's also a really nice little sort of punch dagger knuckle duster thing, which I find cute.
Indeed. So thank you so much for your time. It has been a great pleasure to dialogue with you. I hope we have another opportunity in the future. Yes. Despite the challenges, we finally made it.
Oh my goodness. Yes, we did. We should have had some AI taking care of it for us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. And
good to meet you, Sarah.
Let's hope to see you in a near future here in Portugal.
Yes, indeed.
It would be my pleasure to have you here.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to come. Bye.